accolade President Robinson to be Commissioner for Human Rights. Kofi Annan praises her dynamism and credibility. He calls her an extraordinary leader. 2 murder investigations have begun into recent killings in Dublin. And the computer giant Seagate to give Cork more than 1,000 new jobs. Good evening and welcome. The speculation finally ended shortly before 6 o'clock this evening when UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan announced that he was making one of the most important appointments within his gift. The post was that of UN Human Rights Commissioner, and the nominee was President Robinson, a woman he described as an extraordinary leader. The President said she was very honoured by the appointment. She thanked the government for their support and said, "I deeply appreciate the trust and confidence which the Secretary-General has placed in me." The news has been warmly welcomed by the Taoiseach and by other political leaders. As Ingrid Miley now reports, the Secretary-General has made it clear that he would like the High Commissioner to be in place for the mid-September General Assembly session. The President has indicated this will be discussed when they meet in July.
Morning.
Earlier today, President Robinson attended the 25th anniversary celebrations of the foundation of the single-parent support group Cherish. There was no inkling of the important announcement which was to follow this evening.
And I have therefore decided to name Mrs. Mary Robinson as the next High Commissioner for Human Rights.
In the last few months, the President has made no secret of her desire to work in the human rights arena once her term of office ends. The outgoing government under John Bruton endorsed her candidature for the position.
I do have a very strong inner sense of justice. I have a sense that perhaps part of the commitment to human rights is understanding how vital it is in societies and then being able to communicate in a broader sense. I would welcome a possibility of doing that after my term comes to an end.
Last month, the President met UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan to discuss her candidature, which was helped by the withdrawal of a number of other frontrunners for the position. In a statement issued earlier this evening, she said she was honoured by her appointment and deeply appreciated the trust and confidence which the Secretary-General had placed in her. She also said she valued the support of the Irish government in promoting her candidature. She said the challenges of her position were daunting, but they are ones she was gladly prepared to accept. While the UN position is undoubtedly an honour for President Robinson, one important question remains. Secretary-General Annan has said he wants her to take up her new position in September, but her term of office here at Áras an Uachtaráin doesn't expire until December. As yet, it's unclear whether she'll serve her full term of office or whether a presidential election could be called earlier than expected. Last March, asked about the possibility of an early resignation in the event of her appointment, the President had this to say.
Well, I don't have any reason to anticipate that particular situation. I have spoken to both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach, and they have made it clear that the government would support the possibility of going forward in due course for High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I greatly appreciate that. But I'm committed to seeing out my term, and I certainly sincerely hope that that would be the case.
President Robinson will meet Secretary-General Annan in New York in July to discuss when precisely she will take up her new post.
Mrs. Robinson has expanded the role of the presidency, taking on more engagements than any of her predecessors. Her reputation in the field of human rights was enhanced by a number of high-profile visits to Rwanda and Somalia, as well as to South Africa.
Long before becoming president, Mary Robinson was associated with taking up causes, regardless of whether or not they were popular. As a senior counsel, she's brought cases before the courts here and before the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. 2 years after becoming president, Mrs. Robinson visited Somalia during the famine there. Her moving testimony, both there and to the US media, helped to highlight its people's plight. In 1994, she became the first head of state to visit Rwanda in the aftermath of the ethnic and political violence which left nearly 1 million people dead. She visited the country for the 3rd time earlier this year. The job of UN High Commissioner for Human Rights is based in Geneva. It was established in 1994, and there has only been one previous office holder. He was Jose Alaya Lasso, seen here visiting the aftermath of the genocide in Rwanda. But human rights groups were not happy at the the progress made during his term. He left the job in March this year to become Foreign Minister of his native Ecuador. Amnesty International's International Secretariat has welcomed President Robinson's appointment. The Irish section said their list of qualities for the job read like President Robinson's curriculum vitae.
We're delighted at the appointment of President Robinson. It's essential from Amnesty's point of view that the new Commissioner would be a person who's a champion of human rights and have a proven track record in human rights work and be independent. They must have a clear vision really of the problems that are facing human rights and an understanding of how to tackle them, specifically in areas like women's rights, universality, impunity, and how human rights will actually work in the area of social and economic development.
Well, Fred Eckard, spokesman for the UN Secretary General, joins us now from New York. Good afternoon, Mr. Eckard.
Good afternoon.
Could you fill us in on the nuts and bolts of this position? What is the actual nature of it?
The nature is to be a promoter, a communicator, a coordinator for all human rights activity in the United Nations system. It requires someone with leadership ability, moral standing, political courage. And we are as excited here as many people are there that Mary Robinson has been chosen for this position.
Well, we're talking about attempting to reconcile very diverse views, 185 members. How daunting a prospect is that for the new Commissioner?
It'll be a political landmine for her. 185 nations don't have a consensus on what basic human rights are in the international arena. But one of the jobs of the UN is to build norms, to broaden agreement, and she will pick up where her predecessor left off, and the UN's work in this area is becoming much more operational. It isn't just doing papers in Geneva or studies. It's getting out into the field, doing human rights monitoring and investigating. It's a very interesting time to be taking up a leadership role in United Nations human rights work.
Well, the Secretary General spoke already about the importance of the appointment, and we know that it was very keenly contested. So why do you think he chose President Robinson? What can she in particular bring to this post?
Well, you know, from her standing at home and in Europe and in fact internationally, she has a reputation for being a person of great integrity, great energy, and dynamism. After the first High Commissioner for Human Rights established the diplomatic roots for the job, Secretary General Kofi Annan wanted someone who could take the job to the next level in its evolution. More dynamism, more energy. And it also requires leadership qualities, which she has demonstrated, as well as political sensitivity, precisely because so many nations have differing views of what basic human rights are.
The President has been seen as something of a mould breaker here in Ireland. What, if any, scope will she have to effect change in her new position?
Oh, I think she'll have a lot of opportunity to do that by force of her personality, to put her stamp on this job. She enjoys a lot of support among human rights groups, non-governmental organizations, as well as many governments. So she starts with a strong constituency, which I think will stand behind her as she takes initiatives she feels are worth taking.
Mr. Eckard, thank you very much for joining us. Political leaders have congratulated Mrs. Robinson on her appointment. The Taoiseach said that the position was an important and prestigious one, which he knew she would fill with distinction.
The Department of Foreign Affairs mounted a major lobbying effort in capitals around the world in order to secure the post of UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. This evening, the Taoiseach Dick Spring, who originally nominated Mrs. Robinson for the presidency, was among the first to congratulate her.
I would say without question, she has a broad range of experience at the highest level, And I think her appointment is also very important at a time when the United Nations needs confidence building. And I believe that the appointment of somebody such as President Robinson, a person of highest integrity and calibre, will in fact restore a lot of confidence to the United Nations itself.
Well, it's a tremendous honour for the country, obviously, that Ireland should be the country from which somebody taking on such an important UN job should come. It's obviously a tremendous tribute to the career of our President, her work as a human rights lawyer and as a lawyer generally, and of course her work particularly in the Third World as President.
The Fianna Fáil leader Bertie Ahern also congratulated Mrs Robinson and wished her every success. He said she would bring her undoubted ability, dynamism, credibility and leadership to the position. President Robinson's legal and intellectual abilities are well known. Her new job will also require political and administrative skills. The Taoiseach has had many dealings with Mrs Robinson during the past few years, so how would he assess her political ability?
Well, obviously she has tremendous political skills. Nobody expected that she would be elected as she was President of Ireland, but she was, and she displayed tremendous political skill in that campaign. Obviously the government has worked very hard on her behalf to lobbying all of the countries to get support for the President, but I have to say it was an extremely easy task.
The Taoiseach also said Fine Gael would be putting forward a candidate for the presidency.
And I'm joined now from Leinster House by our political editor, Donal Kelly. Donal, what would the constitutional position be if the President were to resign before the end of her term in office?
Well, Anne, the Constitution does provide for a number of eventualities in relation to the presidency, including President's resignation from office. Indeed, there's a precedent for the current situation with the resignation of Carol O'Dowley in 1976 over the thundering disgrace comments by the then Minister for Defence. Under the Constitution, a President is elected for a 7-year term, but provision is made for such eventualities as his or her removal from office, death, or, as in this case, resignation. The Constitution provides that until a new President is chosen by the people, then the functions of the office will be carried out by a commission comprising the Chief Justice of the day, the Candidacy of the Dáil, and the Cathaoirleach of the Seanad.
So, do you think that we are looking at a revised date now for a presidential election?
Well, again, we must look at the Constitution, and again, it's quite explicit. Article 12, in effect, provides that in the event of a President leaving office for whatever reason, an election must be held within 60 days. Now, we don't know exactly when Mrs Robinson intends to resign, and that indeed may not be decided until her meeting with the Secretary-General in July, but the indications are that she'll probably do so in the first week of September because she has to be in her new position for the session of the UN General Assembly later that month. And so, applying the 60 days constitutional requirement, that means an election would have to be held by the end of October or early November at the very latest.
And of course the political parties have just come through what was for many a bruising campaign. What stomach will they have to face into another one so soon?
Well, you're right, they have come through a bruising election campaign, but they were always facing a presidential election in late November anyway. Indeed, at one time, you'll remember, there had been talk of holding the two on the one day. So the timescale resulting from President Robinson's UN appointment won't be all that different. However, excuse me, it will focus minds on possible candidates, given that when President Robinson announced she wouldn't be seeking a second term, they all seemed to think, all the parties that is, that there should be a presidential poll, and they seemed then at any rate to have ruled out an agreed candidate. So you'd probably be wondering about names, and the names that were in the public arena at that time are coming to the fore again tonight for Fianna Fáil. Former Taoiseach Charles Haughey and Albert Reynolds, David Andrews, Moira Gagan Quinn and Mary O'Rourke, although the latter has said she's not interested. And for Fine Gael, people like Nora Owen, MEP Mary Benotti, former Minister Gemma Hussey, and Peter Barry, although he too is on the record as saying he's not interested. And for Labour, tonight the name of Michael D. Higgins is being mentioned.
No better man to assess the form. Thank you for that. And then we take a break. Still to come on the 9 o'clock news.